mid-15th century China. In the hush of the Forbidden City's inner apothecary, oil lamps quiver against walls lined with jars, some filled with powders, others with creatures suspended in honey-colored fluid. The air smells of iron, musk, and bitter herbs. A court physician leans over a jade bowl where 2 drops of venom swirl into a decoction of roots. He bows before offering it to a trembling patient. To cleanse, they contaminated. To save, they poisoned. This was the logic of Ming medicine. What is foul drives out the fouler. The empire that built porcelain palaces also built laboratories of rot. Behind every imperial banquet and temple festival stood a small army of healers experimenting with snakes, scorpions, and mold. Their world believed that health was balance, yin and yang locked in constant struggle, and that balance could be restored only through confrontation. Purity required a touch of corruption. Dr. Shen the Collector. Dr. Shen began as a herbalist in the southern provinces. Famine had driven him into the wilderness, where he noticed that goats bitten by vipers sometimes survived after eating a weed that grew in swampy ground. He ground the plant into paste, mixed it with a trace of venom, and found that it calmed fevers. Word reached the capital. The court summoned him to brew the life-returning soup. Inside his workshop, jars of toad secretions and sewer molds sat beside ginseng and chrysanthemum petals. The recipe shifted with every batch, always something clean and something filthy. Courtiers gagged at the smell, but emperors applauded the results. Shorter fevers, faster recoveries. Shen called it using heaven's filth to restore heaven's order. His notes describe an early intuition of immunity. He observed that those who handled toxins daily rarely sickened, yet he never claimed mastery. He wrote that the spirits of poison could never be owned, only persuaded. When he died in his 80s, his apprentices sealed his jars inside a temple wall. Centuries later, when restorers reopened it, the odor still clung to the bricks, half herbal, half animal, wholly unforgettable. Madame Li of Nanjing. While Shen worked for emperors, Madame Li healed soldiers and beggars on the streets of Nanjing. Her clinic stood near the fish market, the air thick with salt and decay. People came to her for wounds that would not close. She kept wooden trays of crawling larvae, tiny white maggots bred in clean meat, and laid them gently into infected sores. The insects devoured rot and left the living flesh intact. What looked horrific worked. Within days, ulcers closed like paper fans. Neighbors called her the worm widow. Officials tried to ban her practice, declaring it indecent. But when an officer's son survived a wound others deemed fatal, she was summoned to demonstrate her art before magistrates. She spoke softly. "Life consumes death. We only guide the appetite." They recorded her words, and years later, military surgeons adapted her method for battlefield medicine. Madame Li's ointments smelled of vinegar, honey, and earth. She claimed that disgust itself was part of healing, that the mind, shocked by what it saw, awakened the body's own defenses. Her patients agreed. When she died, they burned offerings of sweet herbs, not to mask the stench, but to honor the courage to face it. The snake alchemist Wu Hanqing. In the mid-15th century, the Ming court employed a physician monk known as Wu Hanqing, later remembered as the snake alchemist. He came from the humid riverlands of Fujian, where cobras and vipers nested in the rice fields. Wu claimed that his master had once told him, "A man cannot fight venom until he has welcomed it." He took the advice literally. His treatments began with drops of snake bile diluted in rice wine. He would drink a cup himself before prescribing it to others, a gesture of faith that horrified onlookers, but impressed officials who valued courage as much as skill. Wu's logic came from Taoist alchemy. Each poison contained the seed of its opposite. In his ledgers he wrote, "The fang that wounds also points toward the cure." Over time, his experiments became ritual. At dawn, he meditated among cages of serpents, believing their breathing synchronized his pulse with the world's hidden rhythms. When fever struck the imperial household, Wu burned powders of dried snakeskin mixed with chrysanthemum and mercury. The vapors filled the halls like metallic incense. Patients recovered often enough that legend began to cloud the records. Eventually, the alchemist's own body bore the marks of his art. His skin yellowed, his eyes reddened, yet he lived past 70. Scholars later called him a proto-toxicologist without knowing the term, a man who turned superstition into observation through reckless devotion. Wu Hanqing left behind a simple maxim that endured among later physicians. Fear not the venom, fear the imbalance that invites it. Imperial physician Zhu Weide. Where Wu sought harmony through venom, Zhu Weide turned infection itself into medicine. Appointed to the imperial dispensary under the Chenghua emperor, Zhu faced a court plagued by recurring fevers and abscesses brought by the dense humidity of Beijing summers. He studied the lesions and concluded that what the body expelled in pus might carry a hidden remedy for those still sick. From this grim reasoning came the pus-pearl pills, tiny spheres of dried discharge from healed patients, blended with honey, camphor, and a trace of gold dust. He believed the gold purified the corruption, balancing the moral and the material. The pills became fashionable among courtiers, terrified of contagion, yet addicted to novelty. To them, the foulness was proof of potency. If something so repellent was willingly swallowed, it must work. Zhu argued that the medicine trained the body's defenses, that small impurities could awaken a greater purity. In time, even skeptics admitted that the pills seemed to lessen epidemic fevers, though no one knew why. Rumor said Zhu kept a private garden where he buried rejected batches, the soil there too rich for ordinary plants, but perfect for medicinal weeds. When the emperor asked him what guided his experiments, Zhu replied, "Your Majesty, rot is only nature's method of refinement." The phrase became proverbial in medical circles long after his death. It captured the Ming court's uneasy wisdom, that beneath disgust lay the first glimmer of understanding. Master Guo, the Phoenix Doctor. By the early 17th century, as the Ming Dynasty strained under rebellion and drought, the Imperial Medical Bureau placed its last hopes in a physician-alchemist named Guo Liang, remembered as the Phoenix Doctor. He was famous for creating antidotes that seemed to resurrect the dying. His workshop stood deep within the palace compound, where mercury shimmered in bowls like liquid mirrors, and smoke coiled upward from crucibles day and night. Guo's philosophy blended Taoist rebirth imagery with cold experimentation. He claimed that every living thing passed through 3 stages: birth, corruption, purification, and that the healer's task was to accelerate that cycle inside the body before disease could. His antidote, known as the Phoenix elixir, combined sulfur, powdered jade, and trace quantities of snake venom. Prepared incorrectly, it could kill within hours. Prepared precisely, it revived patients who had swallowed poisons. Courtiers swore they had seen the color return to a corpse's lips after a single drop. The emperor called him miracle worker, but others whispered that he had crossed into forbidden arts. Guo himself dismissed both praise and suspicion. "I do not command life," he said. "I convince death to wait." His journals, recovered centuries later, describe an understanding that edges toward modern chemistry: precise measurements, controlled reactions, even notes on mercury vapor. Yet he remained haunted by belief. Each night he performed silent prayers to the fire phoenix, spirit of transformation, thanking it for turning corruption into cure. When plague reached the capital in 1641, Guo refused to flee. He sealed himself in his workshop, burning elixirs to purify the air. After a week, attendants found him collapsed beside his furnaces. the room glistening with condensed mercury. His pupil said he had become the phoenix he worshipped, consumed by his own remedy. His death marked the end of Ming toxicology's golden age, a symbol of a dynasty trying to heal itself with its own corruption. The Ming era's venom healers lived in a world that believed balance was everything. Where we see contamination, they saw dialogue between forces. Where we feel disgust, they found revelation. Their poisons, parasites, and decayed herbs were not madness but method, the first steps toward a science that would later isolate vaccines, antiseptics, and immunity. Every drop of bile and every speck of rot carried a question that medicine is still answering. How much poison can a body endure in the name of healing? They served emperors who feared impurity, yet demanded miracles. They worked in shadows, lit by candle flame and belief, guided by a conviction that nature's filth hid nature's wisdom. Dr. Shen gathered venom and mold, proving curiosity could bloom in swamps. Madam Li let worms cleanse what knives could not. Wu Hanqing drank the serpent's essence to teach the body courage. Zhu Weide gilded infection to make disgust palatable. And Master Guo burned himself in pursuit of transformation. Each, in a different way, turned fear into knowledge. When the Ming Dynasty fell, many of their formulas vanished, condemned as heretical, yet the idea behind them endured. Yi-du gōng-du, use poison to fight poison. It survives in modern inoculation, in chemotherapy, in every calculated dose that flirts with danger to preserve life. The line between remedy and toxin remains as thin as it was in those candle-lit rooms. In the end, the story of the venom healers is not about horror but about balance. They remind us that healing has never been clean, that discovery often begins where revulsion lives, and that sometimes the foulest smell in the room is the scent of progress. Their legacy lingers like the trace of smoke after the flame, the memory of an age that cured by contamination and found, in its own disgust, the first taste of modern medicine.